everyone present tonight. Tonight being a first Wednesday, we'll have the reverse order of things, have our class and then a song or two, prayer, reading, and then the talk. And Brother Charlie's to give our talk tonight, so we look forward to that. And have a somewhat abbreviated class. In our readings, I just wanted to call attention that in our readings, we go from July 4 was number 185, Psalm 106 and 7, and then today is 187, July 6. That would be Psalm 115 through 18. Not going to take time to go through all those, except I just hope that you're continuing to read. We have some historical psalms during those that are mentioned. Have some psalms that deal with psalms that were read or sung rather during the time of the Passover. All of that, and some are very short psalms, and one of them is a couple of verses, and one is quoted in Romans the 15th chapter about the nations receiving the gospel. And so hope you're enjoying the reading and profiting from those. Let's go right on into our study tonight. We're in John the first chapter, and I'd like for us to go back and see what we're doing. All four accounts have a different emphasis, and you tell me instead of my telling you, if I can black it out here. Matthew written primarily for what audience? Jews. Key word is fulfilled, and the stress of Jesus is his what? His kingdom. Mark, written primarily for Romans, key word, get it done immediately. It's action, right? Miracles. In fact, the very first verse of Mark is the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, Son of God. Luke stresses his humanity. Key phrase, the Son of Man, and primarily the audience, primarily Hellenist. Okay, John, the key word is, well, key words really: believe, faith, life, light, and it was written in order to create what? Brother Gene just said it. Faith in him as deity, yeah. And so, he's the full Son of God, all right? And then where we are here, the years of preparation, how many? About 30. And they include the birth of whom in Luke 1? Good. What's in Luke 2? Birth of Jesus. Luke 3? Early ministry of John, all right? And then Matthew 1, 2, and 3, the genealogy of Jesus. In Matthew, the announcement to Joseph concerning the birth of Jesus. Matthew 2, he's born, and then the early life, and goes into Egypt, comes back, reared in Nazareth. In Matthew 3, want to remember his baptism, or actually John's teaching and John's baptism, and then Jesus is baptized toward the end of Matthew 3. All right, so what happens at Jesus' baptism insofar as the major outline of Jesus' life? What's that the beginning of? The beginning ministry, right. And so we have the beginning ministry, and it begins with his baptism, goes immediately. The Spirit drives him into the wilderness, where there he was tempted for how many days? 40 days. All right, and then we find him coming to John the Baptist. And a delegation of Sadducees had come to John and asked him, are you the Christ? Are you the prophet? Are you Elijah? He said, no. I'm the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, make his path straight, and so on. And then in 129, that's one you all just cement in your mind. I know you already have. Behold, the Lamb of God that taketh away the sin of the world. And then John identified who Jesus was through the events of his baptism. And then the next point we had is John's testimony, John's baptism, his first disciples come from John the Baptist himself. And so there is first Andrew, and then an unnamed disciple who likely is John the apostle, who would become the apostle. And Andrew, Andrew goes and gets Peter. We found the Messiah. When Andrew and John are together, John the Baptist says again, "Behold the Lamb of God," and they begin to follow Jesus. And Jesus evidently turns around and says, "What do you want?" And they say, "Well, where are you staying?" And he says, "Well, come follow." And he mentions that they stayed with him that day. In fact, the hour is mentioned. The 10th hour. Good. And I could not help but think about this afternoon, and I don't know why I didn't think about it before class Sunday. Our song we sing quite often, Amazing Grace, there's a phrase in that, the hour I first believed. You remember that? The hour I first believed. Here's a significant thing. All right, and then what we have is this next section. Jesus calls Philip and Nathanael. We're still in this southern part in Judea during this time. Let's look at our text and read a little, and then we'll answer some of our questions. If I can find myself on my in our booklet here. We are down on page 25. We answered everything on number 3, did we not? Yes. And number 4, Jesus calls Philip and Nathanael. We'll find that at the end of John 1, there will be 5 disciples who are, 4 are specifically named, and there are 5 altogether that we have who are following Jesus, who have been early disciples of John, and John is pointing them to Jesus, and they're early disciples of Jesus, and then they will become apostles. Let's read 43 through the end of the chapter. Patty, why don't we start with you tonight? 43 through 51. Okay, thank you, Patty. So we have on the morrow, keep in mind, in 19 through 28, that's one day, and then verse 29, the next day, 35, the next day, 43, the next day, and so you have 4 days altogether, and then on chapter 2, verse 1, the third day after that. So you have roughly a week. We pointed that out in our earlier classes, roughly a week of activities that John is recording in this part. All right, so he's minded to go into Galilee, and to go into Galilee, and on our map, he's down here. Let me see if I can back up here just a little bit. I've got too much on here. Anyway, to go up, he would pass through Samaria or go up through Perea and come back around. We'll see later on in John, the 4th chapter, that he's back in Jerusalem, Judea area, and the Pharisees learn that John is, that is Jesus, is making and baptizing more disciples. And so he needs to get out of that area, and so he goes northward to get into Galilee. And to do that, he passes through Samaria, and hence we have the conversation with the woman at the well the Samaritan woman in John the 4th chapter. But anyway, here he's going up into Galilee, and somebody is going with him. Who is it? Verse 43. Philip. And he says, follow me. And the Waldrons make a point in the book, and I think it's a great point, that it's not like he just came up to somebody cold and said, hey, come on, and then he just drops everything and goes. It's likely that he had been listening to John, perhaps listening to Jesus some. Jesus knew him. He knew Jesus. He said, follow me, and he does. We know that happened on other occasions, and there was some, likely some pre-knowledge of all this. Philip was from Bethsaida, of the city of Andrew and Peter. We'll come back to the Bethsaida in just a moment. But Philip goes and finds whom? Nathanael. And it's almost the same thing Andrew tells Peter. You know, we have found the Messiah, which John says being interpreted as the Christ. And here he says, we have found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets wrote. We found the expected Messiah of Old Testament expectation. Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. He doesn't identify him right here as the son of God, but as the son of Joseph. That's his humanity. And so what was Nathanael's response? Yeah, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? And instead of Philip saying, well, you know, you should know better than that. You should know that there's some prophets that have come. He just said what? Just come see him. Come see him. And so Jesus saw Nathanael, and the first thing he says is arrest Nathanael's attention because the quality of character that Jesus identifies Nathanael having could only really be known by whom? By Nathanael and God. Jesus says, behold, what? An Israelite indeed, in whom there is no guile, no deceit, no trickery. We would say he's transparent. What you see is what he is. What you see is what you get. And he's true blue. There's no deceit in him. And so Nathanael says, how in the world do you know anything about me? Whence knowest thou me? Or how do you know me could be the idea. Jesus said, gives him another statement which shows his omniscience, and that is, I saw you a little while ago when you were under the what? The fig tree. And Nathanael said, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art King of Israel. So that was enough for Nathanael to know. Nobody could have known that. There was nobody around. How did he know that? And there's no way that Philip could have told him. And so obviously he's got to be the one that Philip was telling me. We found him about whom Moses in the law and the prophets have spoken. So Jesus then responds in verses 50 and 51, because I told you I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? That's just going to be a drop in the bucket to what you'll later see. And then in verse 51, he really goes back to what all of us would remember, and that is the vision that Jacob had at Bethel when he was running away from Esau. He lay down and put his head on a stone, you remember? And as he lay asleep, he saw in a dream what? A ladder stretching from earth to heaven, and what were ascending and descending? Angels, yes. And it's at that time that God makes the promises to Jacob. Keep your finger right there. Turn back to that passage in Genesis 28 for just a moment. Genesis 28. Read 12 through 17. 12 through 17 of Genesis 28. David, if you would, please. Genesis 28, 12 through 17. Yeah, let's stop right there. In verse 13, what Abrahamic promise is mentioned? The land. What about 14? Nation, the nation. And then in the latter part of verse 14, in thee and thy seed. So you have all three of the Abrahamic promises repeated to Jacob. Okay, David, verse 15 and on. You know, it's an interesting idea. Thank you, David. Surely Jehovah is in this place, and I knew it not. In a sense, you have, well, let me back up. You have all three of the promises repeated to Jacob as he's fleeing from Esau. And these are, as he sees these angels ascending and descending, and the promises are repeated. He says, surely God has been here. I didn't even know about it. I couldn't recognize that, but God has been here. All right, now Jesus, in John, let's go back to John 1. Jesus refers to this, not in so many words by saying, thus it was fulfilled, but he has an analogy showing, verily, verily, I say to you, verse 51, ye shall see the heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. This is a beautiful, beautiful idea. Here you have God in heaven and earth down here in the dream that Jacob has. You have a ladder, and people are going back. And here's Jacob on earth, and Jacob says, surely the Lord was here, and I didn't even know it. Now, Jesus takes that and basically transposes it to him, brings it to himself. And so, really, God is with Jesus. In fact, Emmanuel means God with us. And furthermore, there's a second idea, a major idea, I think, and that is, here is this ladder from earth reaching into heaven, and there are angels ascending, descending. The ladder reaches to heaven, and here's Jesus on earth. It's as if Jesus becomes the ladder from earth to heaven. Jesus here on earth becomes the access to God in heaven. And so he says, you're going to see greater things than my ability simply to tell you that I saw you under the fig tree a while ago when nobody was around. He says there are greater things than this. I think he's actually in embryonic form saying, I'm the way to heaven. Like in 14, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Well, that's basically the same idea here. But he doesn't say it in so many words, but he does refer the Jews back to that event. Comment, question, anybody? Yes. You've got to be the Son of God. You're exactly what, yeah. Good. All right, let's answer some of these questions, and we'll see if we can't move into chapter 2 for just a few minutes. This is A under 4, page 25. The next day, Jesus thought about going into Galilee when he found Philip and said, what? Follow me. This man was from Bethsaida, likely the same as will be mentioned later. Jesus will do a lot of miracles in Bethsaida, and he will chastise them because he had done so many, and there were still so many people who were unbelievers. Robin was looking at a map a while ago. I just asked her, what she's looking at, and she was looking at that in the northern part of the Sea of Galilee, and I've got a map on that in just a moment. But in Matthew, the 12th chapter, Jesus Matthew records Jesus upbraided the cities wherein he had done many mighty works. And he said, woe unto thee, Bethsaida, woe unto thee, Chorazin. For if the works done in thee were done in Tyre and Sidon, they would remain to this day. And thou, Capernaum, do you think you'll be exalted into heaven? I say you'll be cast into hell. For if the works done in thee were done in Sodom, it would have remained to this day. So Jesus had done so many mighty works, miracles in those cities, and yet remember the old adage we talked about in the Old Testament? The more opportunities people have, the more what? More responsibilities. And that's what we're going to see here with Jesus in these cities that he does a lot of miracles in. All right, see, Philip found whom? Nathanael told him that he had found the one whom Moses and the law and the prophets wrote. It is assumed that Nathanael is the same as Bartholomew for several reasons. First, John never lists Bartholomew. Matthew, Mark, and Luke never mention Nathanael in the list of apostles. Second, Matthew, Mark, and Luke invariably place Philip next to Bartholomew and show a tendency to place brothers and close friends together. That's always the case in the list of the apostles. And three, all the other disciples mentioned in John 1 become apostles, and none are so highly commended as Nathanael. I've got something on the chart on that. We'll come back to that in a moment. What was Nathanael's original thinking about Jesus when Philip told him that they had found the Messiah? Can any good thing come out of Nazareth? And Philip, to his credit, said, come and see. Yeah. The first thing Jesus did was describe Nathanael. What about him? An Israelite in whom there is no guile. This should have grabbed his attention. Who only knows? We already answered that. Who only knows if we are without deception besides? Yeah, God. Yeah, nobody. People might think that, but if we're not, only we and God would know. Nathanael's surprise indicates Jesus' knowledge of his character was miraculous. This led to his asking Jesus how he knew anything about him. Jesus next answered by saying that before Philip had called him, he had seen him under a what? The fig tree. What made it significant is that fig trees offer dense shade in Palestine, a shade where no sunspots can be seen. So likely, Nathanael was resting under such a tree and was alone where no one could see him. It created strong faith on the part of Nathanael to the point that he, really this would be what you would have to consider the first unforced confession. Not that forced is a bad thing, but Jesus asked in Matthew 16, Jesus said, who do you say that the Son of Man is? And Peter made the great confession. But this is just, we might say, spontaneous. The spontaneous confession that Nathanael made was, thou art what? The Son of God, thou art King of Israel. While Nathanael considered what Jesus did a great miracle, he would see even what? Greater things in those. And some of those included the heavens opened up and angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. In the note here, I've mentioned likely Jesus referred to Jacob's dream, and it may mean that Nathanael would learn Jesus as the ladder or the access from earth to heaven. And second, Jesus refers to himself at the end here in verse 51 as the Son of Man, emphasizing his humanity. He was just as human as he was divine, and both were necessary for him to accomplish his mission. We will see both of these terms used to describe him. He was both the Son of God and the Son of Man. He was God in human form. And the third note, really what I mentioned in that is that there are 10 different phrases used to describe Jesus in the first chapter of John. Word, only begotten Son, the prophet, the Lamb of God, the Son of God, teacher, rabbi, Messiah, Christ, King of Israel, Son of Man. All of those are descriptive of who Jesus is. And then the fourth note, the miracle involved in Jesus describing Nathanael's character, plus knowing where he had just been when evidently no one else was present, brought the effect intended then and now, belief on him as the Son of God. We can quote 20, 30, and 31. Many other signs did Jesus in the presence of his disciples that are not written in this book, but these are written that you might believe. Right. All right. I wanted to come on down here on our chart and notice that up here, well, we've been down here in the wilderness of Judea, outside of Jerusalem, in the area of Judea. And Jesus he was minded to go into Galilee, and he does. And we're seeing in chapter 2 that he goes to what city where the water was changed to wine? He goes to Cana. And then in chapter 2, verse 12, he makes a brief trip over to Capernaum, which Capernaum is right here. This line over, this circle over here that I have is actually Bethsaida. And it's basically ruins now, some stones on top of the other. But it was on this, I like to tell people, if you can consider the Sea of Galilee like your hand or a clock. And Capernaum is over here at 11 o'clock. Chorazin is about 12, and Bethsaida is about 1 o'clock. If you want to look at them out, that just makes it easy for me to remember. But you have Capernaum, Chorazin, and Bethsaida. Cana is over here just north of Nazareth, and we'll see how Jesus will go not only here at Cana, but in chapter 4 of John, Jesus is going to go to Cana, and there will be a nobleman's son who is sick in Capernaum. Here at Cana, Capernaum is about 16 miles away, and the man who has this servant in Capernaum is going to ask Jesus in Cana, can you come and heal my servant? And guess what happens? He's healed without Jesus, moving a lick. He's healed, and the hour is mentioned, and so when he gets back over there, he understands, hey, it's the same time yesterday when I talked to Jesus and he said he's healed it. So I think the reason I mention that, guys, is it's really helpful, I think, to have a map and to know note these where these cities are, so you can kind of get the feel for what's going on. Okay, another thing I wanted to mention. Okay, here are 4 lists of the apostles. In Matthew 10, this is when Jesus sends them out on the limited commission. The same as in Luke 6. We have a listing in Mark 3, and then, of course, in Acts, the 1st chapter. Now, what we see in John 1 are these 5 that are mentioned. Simon, whom Jesus called Peter. Andrew actually brings Peter to the Lord. John is unnamed. And then Philip. And then Philip goes and he's not known as Bartholomew here, but Nathaniel. Right. So we have 5 early disciples. When I was very, very young, and I just want to kind of throw this at you. If you've had the same experience as I do, maybe you can appreciate this. When I was younger, I didn't see how the chronology of the life of Jesus went together. And I just kind of thought at some point the apostles just kind of, they tagged along, and all of a sudden they had miraculous gifts. And that's just really not how it was. What we find early on is that among all these multitudes that John baptized and taught, there were people who actually listened. And when John said, there he is, he's the one I've been telling you about, follow him. And some did. And those who were extremely close to Jesus and they were listening, they started following him. And so they see. So you see John is there, evidently Andrew, Philip, Peter is with him, though they're not all mentioned. They're obviously there at Cana of Galilee. And so they're watching and they're following. A little later, in Matthew 4, which is also in Mark 1, Jesus is going to be up there by the Sea of Galilee, and he's going to say, this is also in Luke 5, he says, come, he tells Peter, Andrew, James, and John, come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. All right. That is, he is taking some of these and he is saying, I want you to really closely follow me. Well, then by the time of Matthew 10, they've been following him all the way up here in Galilee, and he takes among all these disciples who are following him, among whom are these that we've been talking about, and he says, he takes them and he says, I'm going to send you, apostolos, apostle, make you apostles. And in Matthew 10, in the limited commission, he actually gives them miraculous gifts. So it's on into the Galilean ministry before Jesus actually calls them his apostles. But there's a development along the line. That's the point I'm trying to make. That there's a slow development. They're following John, then they follow Jesus. They get a little closer to Jesus, and then he says, come follow me and I'll really make you fishers of men. And then he gives them special powers. And then, of course, after he dies, is raised, appears. He gives them the Great Commission. And so does everybody follow that? There's that development of that I think is helpful to see. I wanted to tell you something Sunday morning, and I forgot to do it. I thought when I was 20 years old, forgive the personal reference, but when I was 20, I was back in Birmingham. I'd come home from school from Atlanta, and I wanted to teach and wanted to do as much as I could. And I didn't, I knew something, but I didn't know a whole lot. But I'd heard about Brother Homer Haley. And I found out he was in a meeting at Summerton. And he was doing morning and evening services. And so I went up, I think it was a Monday morning. I didn't have any class. I was going to UAB some. And I went up to there, and the first time I heard Brother Haley, I was hooked. I thought, man, I love this guy. I really want. And I was just kind of hanging around. Now, granted, I'm 20 years old. I'm a 20-year-old punk kid. But I think, man, this guy has got it together. I would really like to know a little bit more about what he knows about the Bible. And so I was just kind of hanging around. And brother, I had to call Neil to be reminded who was preaching there. John Iverson was preaching at Summerton. And so Brother Iverson just said, Philip, he got to know who I was. He said, I'm having Brother Haley over for lunch. My wife and I are. Why don't you just come over? So I thought, wow, yeah, this is great. So I was able to go, and I was just all ears. I didn't know enough to ask questions, but I just felt like, whatever he says is worth my hearing. And I kind of thought about Andrew when I was thinking about this Sunday morning, that, I don't know how much Andrew knew, but he knew this is somebody I want to listen to. I want to talk. I want to listen to him talk. And I have felt in the same way about, it's not obviously, Brother Haley's not Jesus Christ, but he had a lot to say that I thought could profit me. And I just think sometimes if we are around somebody, like y'all said about Sewell and Bill, you just kind of want to hang on every word. Can you imagine being in the very presence of Jesus, and every word, as even the deputation from the Jews in John 7, they heard him preach, they went back and they asked, why didn't you bring him back? And their only explanation was, never did a man so speak. And I think that's kind of where some of these were. They didn't know it all, certainly, but they were learning and hanging on to every word he said. Comment or question? Sandra, you looked like you wanted to say something. Just a kind of rural city, not popular. Jonah actually came from not Nazareth, but the northern Galilean area, Gathhepher, which was up in Galilee. They made criticisms there in John 7. No prophet ever came out of Galilee. Well, they were mistaken about that. However, I think the main point was, Sandra, that they thought if you had to be a man of letters, studying at Jerusalem to be a real prophet, kind of like Saul of Tarsus with Gamaliel. That's when you get your credentials, when you study under some rabbi in Jerusalem, and he hadn't done that. Anybody else? Good question. Okay, so here we are. We've been down in Jerusalem, and he's gone up to Cana, and that's where we will have the marriage feast, the turning water to wine. He'll have a quick trip to Capernaum. Then he'll come right back to Jerusalem, and we'll have the cleansing of the temple there in the 2nd chapter of John. All right, anybody else? Any comment, questions? Okay, we'll have to stop. Thank you for your help.